Hello and welcome everyone to our Tea Time SEO. Here at Authoritas, we have our Tea Time SEO every day at 4 p.m. where we encourage everyone to take a nice tea break, 15 or so minutes, connect with others and learn something new. Hello, very warm welcome to Sarah. She was on the show with us before, as well as Azim, and hello, Andy, and Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. So I'm SEO Joe Blogs, growth marketer here at Authoritas, and I'm also joined here by Carrie Shepherd.
Hi, guys.
So Carrie and I are in the marketing team, and you've probably seen some emails from Carrie about the agenda for the week. If you would like to be on the show with us, please email Carrie, and you can have one of the spots. We are running this all throughout May, so please get in touch. And also, we will be having some questions at the end. So we have some great speakers today. We have Kristina Azarenko, Kim Dewe, and Joanna Lewis. Kristina's been on the show a couple of times before. Great to have you all back with us, or you all with us, and Kristina back with you. So I'll pass over now. Kristina will introduce herself, and then Kim, Joe, and then we'll go to some nice juicy bits around SEO Friendly Migrations. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be back here. I'm Kristina, I'm an eCommerce and technical SEO consultant, and during a decade of working in digital marketing and SEO, I've been through many migrations, and that's why I'm so excited to share my tips today. And what you don't see on this slide is that I'm a quarantine dollhouse builder. So while we are all quarantining, I'm building dollhouses just to get myself out of my head and think about strategically about different things in life, which helps actually in SEO. That's me.
Cool. I'm Kim. I'm the head of SEO at Blue Array, the UK's largest specialised SEO agency. We work with high growth startups to global brands such as Flume, GoCardless, TI Media, and Future. During my time at Blue Array, I've been involved with all types of migrations, whether it's the simple HTTPS migration, image host server migration, CDN changes, complete domain overhaul. So I'm looking forward to sharing my tips of what I've learned along the way.
Hi there, I'm Joanna. I've been agency side for 10 years before starting SEO Eskimo. And since then, I've been involved in a lot of migrations, technical projects, and that's become my forte. And eCommerce SEO migrations are about the closest I get to an Apollo mission. But we get to come back. That's a good thing. If they go well, which they should. So I'm going to talk about one that I'm undertaking at the moment, which is quite interesting, I think you'll find.
Great. So yes, this is my turn to share some tips. So migrations are hard. They require lots of resources and lots of preliminary work in terms of strategy. And I've been through many different types of migrations, but today I'm going to concentrate my tips specifically around the migrations when one brand acquires another brand. So it's basically with the brand, you also acquire a website, and that's where a migration happens. The worst thing that you can do while doing this type of migrations is to just redirect everything from the old website to the new website without any initial research. Never do this. Instead, there are two scenarios. First of all, you can leave the old website entirely or leave the old website and redirect some of the pages from it. And the second scenario is to redirect the old website entirely, improving it along the way. I wanted to change, yes, but great. So scenario one is leaving the old website and redirect only part of the pages. The thing that you need to do first is to analyze this website, the old website, the website of the company that was acquired. Analyze this website and see which pages bring the most traffic. Then break this down, bring these pages down into two different categories. First of all, those which are not relevant for some reasons anymore, those can be redirected to the new website. And secondly, those pages which are relevant and which are competing with the new website, with the acquiring company website. I'll give you an example. So I was working with one client, and they acquired their competitor. It happens a lot with acquisitions that the company, the first company which acquires the second company, are actually competitors. And that's really good thing, because when one company acquires another and they're competitors, you can benefit from all the rankings and all the traffic which is already coming to the acquired website. So instead of just redirecting all the pages, instead of removing all the pages, you can actually benefit from rankings of these pages. So what I did, I left the old website URLs in terms of products and added information that this company has been acquired by another company, and here is a link to the new product page, which means that that I have the rankings and all the search potential for both companies, instead of just redirecting and leaving only one new website in the search. But this works only for those situations where the old website is already ranking. You don't want to really spend lots of time and effort on ranking it and leaving it, so that if it's already ranking, you should leave the pages. The second scenario is redirect the website entirely, improving it along the way. So first of all, you need to map out the pages from the old website to the new website. It's pretty straightforward. We all created redirect maps. But before doing any redirects, analyze the content on the old website and choose the content which you can use on your new website before redirecting. Because this means that you can save time and efforts on creating the new content, and which basically means you save resources and money. So instead of just removing this, if you implement a redirect, you don't have access to the old page, right? So instead of just removing this, you can repurpose the content, and as a result, as I said, you save resources and save money, which is really important. And yes. And there are a few things when it comes to user experience considerations. The worst thing that you can do is to just redirect users without any indication that this website has been acquired, that this company is no longer available. So the main idea here, you can do like three different things. First of all, add an indication to the old website that it has been acquired by another company. Maybe add a logo of the new company that now belongs to the company B, which has acquired it. This is applicable to situations where we leave the old website. Secondly, add an indication to the new website that it acquired the old company. I hope it makes sense. So this is applicable for both scenarios. And last but not least, add any supporting content that you can have that will help users to understand these relationships between those two companies. And here's a good example which I use in my experience. So the company A acquired the company B, and they used to be competitors, but for different markets. One was for the USA market, and the second was for Canada market. But still, many people were Googling for company A versus company B. They wanted to see, to compare them and to see which company they want to go for. But once one company acquired another company, there was no need to compare, right? Because these is basically the same company. So for all the searches which were company A versus company B, I created a page which was like company A versus company B. You don't need to choose anymore because we are one company. And whenever people were looking for this, they landed on this page, and it was really useful for them, and they didn't go to any competitors or didn't need to do any other research because basically that's what they found. So the bottom line here is that do your initial research before doing any migrations when it comes to acquiring one company by another company. That's it for me for today.
Yeah, so for me, I'm really focusing on soft skills for this first tip that I have. I think it's quite difficult to generalize tips for all types of migrations, but I think there's one that's particularly relevant, and that's project management skills. I think they're the crux of a good migration. And it's really important to plan for Murphy's Law, which I'm sure we've all experienced, which that pretty much states anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So at the core of this is a checklist. At Blu-ray, we essentially have this really long checklist that we've developed over like 5 years, so it's pretty static for all types of migrations. Though we remove things that aren't relevant to the type of migration that we might be performing, but it covers all aspects of technical analytics, backlinks, and keywords. Yeah, so it's pretty exhaustive, but it's pretty difficult to plan for the wild cards, the unforeseen circumstances that might arise despite having defined objectives at the start. And what you thought was a clear understanding of the migration procedure. For example, I worked with a large clothing retailer, millions of pages, and they were essentially upgrading their CMS from Magento 1 to Magento 2. I'm sure quite a few of us have done that migration over the last couple of years. But partway through the migration, we realized that actually the wealth of knowledge that we had was actually probably better spent in helping inform their back end. Turns out there's a lot of customizable fields within Magento 2, which needed to be considered quite early in the migration process. And that's not typically something me as an SEO would consider to be a typical migration task. So yeah, if you're working as an agency or as a freelancer, often I find that giving clients access to this checklist can be quite a good sales technique as well. It's really can be the tipping point to choose whether or not they work with you. It's really good for them to sort of see exactly what you might be working on throughout that process. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, at Blu-ray, we have a list that we've been curating over like 5 years. But if you don't have such a spreadsheet, there's boundless checklists available online, which I came across a good one from Site Visibility, but I think Botify also has a really good one. I'd recommend reviewing a number of resources from around the web and just creating your own though. So once you have a specific checklist, I often recommend that you move this into like a Gantt chart just to for project management purposes, and ensuring that the core project management team has visibility on this for transparency purposes. It's really important that it's also segmented into the phases of pre-staging and post-launch. Again, you might work in more specific phases in this, but I find at the very least these 3 phases are really important. And then typically the way I think that any SEO should work through this Gantt chart is sort of in the waterfall model, which you may have come across if you've sort of been involved with software development models. But essentially this is a sequential model which requires the phases of requirements, design, implementation, verification, and maintenance. Furthermore, because we're taking a more collaborative approach with migrations, I like to also define with stakeholders what done actually means. Often this is up to interpretation, and what the developers often consider done is different to what the SEO might be considered done. So whether it's done from an SEO perspective or whether it's done from a development or marketing perspective, it's important that everyone has an understanding of that. Lastly, my other point is that when you are doing a migration, not only migrating the digital assets of a website, but also the expectations of stakeholders. So unless you're completely abolishing a website domain and starting from scratch, it's very likely that stakeholders are expecting to quickly recover. So this goes on to my last point within this tip, and that's that communication is hugely important. I attended a workshop called I Am Remarkable, which is a Google initiative. I'm sure some of us have probably attended that. And they were essentially saying that when you're working within a team, it's all about like 80% implementation, but 20% of your time should be spent on communication. I think that rings particularly true for migrations. Moving on to my next slide. Yep, don't forego monitoring. So monitoring is the one constant throughout the migration process, which I think is really important. It's very likely that you'll be monitoring sort of like the pre, during, and post-launch. And you very likely have monitoring already set up, but I always recommend that you create a separate data studio report, which specifically monitors key metrics. One of the best features within Data Studio, of course, is the blend mode, which, depending on the type of migration you're doing, can be really useful for pulling multiple data sets together. This is something we did for a multi-million page multiple domain consolidation project, and it proved to be really useful for the monitoring. Of course, Data Studio can be automated, which is really good, but there's some things that's probably missing, so I always recommend that you use tools like Uptime Robot, Content King for real-time crawling. So if you've ever performed a migration in the past, you'll understand there's also risk at every corner. So while we do everything to mitigate that risk, even to the point of staggering items in the waterfall model to isolate items and iron out bugs, we always need the option to roll back. So I'd recommend that you don't do a migration during a website's peak season. At Blu-ray, as a general rule, we typically inform stakeholders that they should expect at least a 20% variation in traffic. And while this might be the only time an SEO says this, we often recommend that they compensate that loss with PPC. As a final tip there, that I've got a bonus tip, I always recommend that you also inform yourself of the tech stack before the migration begins. So SEOs aren't typically developers, but we work really closely with them. So whether or not that's researching the CMS they're using, the JavaScript frameworks they might be using, the CDN, it's really important that you sort of understand what suspected issues might arise. Again, misunderstanding of the tech stack might come down to a communication issue, but ultimately it's up to us as SEOs to maintain a level of control over the project and do our due diligence. Yes, that's me. I'll pass it over to Joanna now.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about undertaking an SEO migration, international SEO migration in my dressing gown. And you might be wondering why I'm not wearing a dressing gown. I can't talk about that. But we have 22 domains covering 18 languages, 3 realms, which I'll talk about more, and at least 4 dressing gowns. And SEO Eskimo takes no responsibility for your fashion choices during lockdown. I know many of you are working alone, so be careful what you wear, it still matters. If you could flick me, thank you. So just a little bit about this. We're right in the middle of the migration at the moment, so I don't have any results for you. They're a well-known brand with many stores around the world. It suffered a poor migration into Magento 1 in 2015, and unfortunately Magento was poorly optimized in its current state due to diffuse local approaches and technical constraints. And our SEO work was due to start in November, but has been delayed until, I think, the beginning of February. We started working on the SEO planning for this properly. And I think it's fair to say that international multilingual migrations with tight deadlines and during pandemics are quite challenging. And I'll talk about some of that challenge in a moment. So yeah, this is just showing the kind of timeline. So the clients opted for a phased cutover approach where instead of cutting over all their domains in one chunk, in 1 week or in 1 day, we're going to be cutting over across about 6 weeks or so. And that was actually going to be about 3 months before. That's been compressed down to 6 weeks. I think phased cutovers have their advantages and disadvantages. The main disadvantages are the human toll it can take in terms of monitoring everything, checking everything, preparing everything, and looking backwards and forwards simultaneously over a long period of time. And I think everyone who's been involved in migrations knows that they're quite stressful when you cut over. So this could be a very difficult period we're about to enter. But I think as long as we get the technical and fundamentals right, as been discussed previously, I think we'll be okay. So yeah, there's going to be a lot to do. Next slide. Thanks. So their teams are globally distributed. They manage the migration. They manage their own websites in different countries. I've actually got something, sorry, covering the screen. Thanks. Yeah, and there's a lack of uniformity in URL structure. There's no way of identifying what common URLs are between locales. There's there's no codes in the URLs, there's nothing to identify them whatsoever, which has problems for hreflang, for redirect mapping. There's no way of just looking at URL and knowing what type of URL it is at all. So we've had to do a lot of work with the back end to try and identify that, and also scraping a lot of content on the pages as well. And there's just multiple implementations across these different domains with many languages, and the pandemic again, which I think is worth mentioning. So I think just MVP is a very common acronym that gets thrown around in migrations, minimal viable product. The debate about what a minimal viable product is for a migration is as long as you want to make it. Obviously, as SEOs, we should be pushing to prioritize rankings above all. I think that's the first thing we should do. So when you're drawing up a list of 100 plus requirements for the new platform, which is what I certainly did, I was asked to prioritize them. And so then looking at what's about retention more than anything. So retaining visibility in all its forms. So not just in standard web search, but across the board. Automate as much as possible, from redirect mapping to hreflang mapping, which I'll talk about in a minute. And all processes as possible. Just try and automate as much as possible, including reporting, obviously, which has been discussed. And fight for your channel as well. If you're an SEO and you're working on a migration, fight hard, because as was stated before, developers have different perspectives on when something's finished or okay. Make sure it's absolutely clear, and don't close task down until you're 100% sure it's right, because there may be no going back. But have respect for UX and other channels. So just go back there. Have respect for UX and other channels, and to capture all the data. Okay, so we know that all the performance data, all of the link data, all of the core data, and make sure it's all stored and safe. Go on to the next slide. Thanks. So one of the biggest challenges and idiosyncrasies of this project has been the realms. So we have EMEA, and we have a kind of US realm, and we have Asia, and they are technically fragmented. We have 3 different Salesforce Commerce Cloud implementations. I should have mentioned that Magento 1, they decided not to go to Magento 2, then they have to go to Salesforce. So these 3 realms exist, and that creates problems because they can't speak to each other natively. They're 3 separate entities, which I think many of us would shake our heads at, and rightfully so. So if we go on to the next slide, hreflang. So yeah, hreflang. How does that speak to hreflang? Well, one idea I had was to create a centralized database of category codes and product SKUs, which we could then be populated via an API, which would then allow the hreflang to be speaking to each other between these locales. Turns out today, I just heard from the developers that they can't do it for MVP, and that they have another solution, which would mean the hreflang would link to a non-canonical version of the URL. So that was a fun morning I had this morning. But we're going to escalate this with Salesforce. And I think this is one of the things, expect the unexpected, expect difficult challenges like this. This is a particularly unusual problem where you have different realms perhaps doing things, but there'll always be the unexpected, so be prepared for it. Next slide. Okay, so the future of work, and I think this is just something I want to say. The slide speaks for itself. By the way, always include a pyramid in an SEO presentation. Not to be critical of my fellow presenters, but we didn't have pyramids. Yeah, and just I don't think we need an office as much as we thought we did. That's one of my main conclusions. And I think that's been actually something that we'll see change. It's my prediction. So not big on predictions, but that's one of them. If we could just go to the last slide. Yeah, so Data Studio, absolutely agree. Search Console API, third-party platform of your choice. Take what you will from this slide. But I think absolutely reporting is really key. Not just reporting to stakeholders, but actionable insights, analytical, that you can really dig down and see where the problems are. And yeah, for this project, that's a very complex thing to do, but we have to do it, and so should you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Some really fantastic tips there, and really good advice that you've all shared, obviously going through the migrations, and especially you, Joe, right now. I'll pass over to Carrie because we've got quite a few questions coming in.
Great, thank you. So we have a question for Kristina first. What is the worst thing you said that the worst thing you can do is to redirect all the pages with no initial research done, and that you should never do it. Have you had this experience, and what did you do to solve this?
The answer is no, I haven't had this experience, because when I work with a company, I didn't have this experience, because the first migrations that I went through were when I was in a small company and I was the only SEO there. And I think I just instinctively realized that I can get more from the old website if I just put some more effort into connecting the old website with a new website, versus just pulling the trigger and redirecting the website. So that's why I didn't have such experience. But yeah, I still think that it's important to do the preliminary research, and also even if you want to redirect, make a redirect map, because many people, when they don't consult SEOs, they don't realize that it's actually important, and they just redirect the old website to the homepage of the new website, because it's hard to see this connection between different pages because the websites are really different. So yeah, that's something that's important.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Flo for everyone. When you worked on a website migration, were you the only SEO supporting the project, or did you have a team of other SEOs or an SEO agency supporting you?
So in my case, I just speak for myself. I mean, I've done both. So when I was in agency land for, I guess, 10 years or so, roughly, and 8 years, and then in-house, I had teams of people working on big e-commerce migrations. I've worked on big e-commerce migrations on my own. This is the second big e-commerce, big brand that I'm working on my own. So I'm the only consultant across all of this stuff. So I've done both, and it's quite hard.
Yeah, I think at Blue Array, we're an agency, so there's always going to be a level of collaboration going on there. But again, I've worked with both on the other end. We will work directly with SEOs within an in-house team on the client side, but also worked without SEOs on the other side. We worked maybe directly with a developer. But again, I think it all just comes down to communication, no matter who you're working with. Sort of like if I'm working with a developer, it's all about developing that strong rapport so that they will sort of loop you into communication and conversations in their ideation phases.
Yes, for me, I worked with multiple migrations when I was in-house. So I was the only SEO there, so I was the only one doing this. I also worked as a consultant, so also alone. But at the same time, when I was working for an agency, I was the main SEO, but there were also other people taking part into it, writing subject criteria and all this stuff. So for a huge migration, it was really, really great help when you have multiple people on board.
That's really useful. Thanks, guys. So we got a question from Sarah. How often would you review that project? She says she loves a good Moscow to help getting to an MVP that is understood by all. How often would you review that during a project in order to meet deadlines and keep it all achievable?
Most days.
Okay. Thanks.
So is that more like, I was going to just say on this one, I guess during a migration, you would have, hopefully, you touch base quite regularly then, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's, and we have daily stand-ups. Obviously, I think you could draw concentric circles around how you check things. So you might check certain things every day, you might check another thing every couple of days, another thing weekly, depending on its priority level and its timeline. It's a good question because, sometimes things slip through the net because they don't get checked. So that's the reality of life. Yeah.
too late to redirect all pages to them? And it says, please start your answer with it depends.
It depends.
Well, if the page brings traffic, it's weird that you didn't notice it 1 or 2 years ago. But if the page still brings traffic, then yeah, redirect. If it doesn't, then leave it as it is. Or for them.
I guess I just add to that if you know what the page was and it's a 400, and you know that it had value, it has links pointing at it or something like that, then I'm sure John Mueller would say only redirect it to a relevant page if there's a relevant page on the site. And that's actually one of the things about redirects that we've started to be very brutal about, is not redirect to relevant pages just for the sake of trying to pass page rank around the site, which to me is something that doesn't work anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it depends.
I love that.
Okay, great. So we have a question from Azim. How do you sell this process to other teams to get them on board when conducting migrations?
Ice cream.
Yeah, I think for me, like as I mentioned when I was running through my segment, was that it's just really important to give the other stakeholders visibility on your process really early on, because very likely they also have their own process. And if you can merge the two, you're on the money. So it all comes down to communication. If you're sort of expecting to be an SEO and just operate in the background, it's going to fail. I think having worked on so many migrations, I'm pretty confident that the #1 cause of a migration failure is really that lack of communication.
Great. So that's all the questions we have today. Thank you everyone for joining. Back over to Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And thanks also, Joanna, for mentioning about the SERPs API as well. So at Authoritas, we sent a tweet out earlier just about, we've actually just launched user intent for SEO keyword research. The beta is now live in the SERPs API. So if anybody would like to be part of that beta group and give it a spin, you're more than welcome. I'll just post the tweet in here. And I just want to say a big thank you to Kristina for coming back again. Kristina's over in Canada, Kim's in London, and Joanna as well. I'm in Barcelona. We have Carrie in London. So we've got an international team here. It's been very busy for many of us, so really appreciate everyone coming on board today. And tomorrow we will be back again for Tea Time SEO with 3 other speakers, Aleda, Gianluca, and Nitan. I hope everyone has their tea ready for tomorrow. And if you want to share your view, your Tea Time SEO view, please do so on our Twitter account. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming today. And if you would like to get hold of Joanna, Kim, or Kristina, please do so. They will be on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and we will be tweeting this out later today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have
a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, our audience members.